Why avoidants go quiet but obsess over you in their minds. You ever find yourself wondering how someone who pulled away from you is still watching your stories, still popping up in your life here and there, liking a post, sending a meme, yet saying nothing meaningful? It's confusing, it's frustrating, it feels like emotional whiplash. Let me tell you something most people won't. Avoidants don't stop thinking about you. They just don't know how to handle what they're feeling. You see, avoidants are often deeply emotional people who were never taught how to trust intimacy. Their nervous system registers closeness not as safety, but as danger. So when things start to get too real, they pull away not because they don't care, but because caring feels terrifying. But here's the twist. Even when they're gone, you're still in their mind. They're watching. They're wondering. They're replaying moments. But they're doing it from the safety of distance. And that's the part that messes with your head, because you're feeling their absence while they're secretly obsessed with your presence. But listen to me carefully. You deserve more than someone who only knows how to love you from far away. You deserve someone who chooses you with their actions, not just their anxiety-laced fantasies. So if an avoidant has gone quiet on you but can't seem to let you go in their mind, don't let that confuse your worth. Let it clarify your standards. Avoidants often pull away not because they don't care, but because they fear intimacy. This is one of the most misunderstood dynamics in relationships, especially when you're on the receiving end of someone suddenly goes cold after things seem to be going well. It's tempting to assume their distance means they've lost interest or were never serious in the first place. But what's usually happening underneath is far more complex and emotional. Avoidant attachment stems from early life experiences where closeness was either unpredictable, overwhelming, or not emotionally safe. When someone with this attachment style begins to feel connected or vulnerable in a relationship, it triggers old survival mechanisms. Instead of leaning in, they back away. Not because they want to lose you, but because connection feels like a threat to their autonomy, their emotional safety, or their control. In their nervous system, closeness equals danger, so they retreat. They might stop texting as often, cancel plans, or become vague and emotionally unavailable. Ironically, this retreat can happen right at the moment when intimacy deepens after a great weekend together, after expressing feelings, or after you start opening up to them more. This is when many people get blindsided because they assume that emotional connection naturally leads to more connection. For an avoidant, it often leads to internal panic. Their mind goes into overdrive, creating distance as a protective strategy. It's not about you, it's about the fear of what getting closer might mean, loss of control, fear of getting hurt, or the terrifying possibility of needing someone too much. What's difficult is that avoidants don't always understand their own behavior in the moment. They often aren't consciously saying, I'm afraid, so I'm pulling back. Instead, they might tell themselves the connection is moving too fast, or that something feels off. They may even convince themselves they're not as into you as they thought, just to justify the emotional distance they're creating. But the truth is, many avoidants do care deeply. The very fact that they pull away often signals that something is growing emotionally, only it feels unsafe. So while you might be feeling hurt, confused, or rejected, the avoidant person may be off in their own emotional storm, obsessing over you from afar, unsure how to step forward without losing their sense of emotional safety. This inner conflict leads to silence, not because they've let you go in their mind, but because they haven't figured out how to hold space for their feelings and yours at the same time. Understanding this can help you separate your worth from their patterns. You didn't do something wrong. You didn't push too hard. Their fear isn't a reflection of your value, it's a reflection of their own emotional wiring. And while empathy is powerful, it doesn't mean you should wait around for someone to get over their fears. Recognizing that avoidants often pull away when they start to care can help you stop blaming yourself and start choosing what kind of love you want to accept. Avoidants tend to process emotions from a distance, which leads to obsessive thinking while staying silent. This is one of the most paradoxical aspects of avoidant behavior, and it can be incredibly confusing for the person on the other end of the relationship. From the outside, it looks like they've disconnected, moved on, or simply don't care. But internally, their mind can be completely consumed by the content. They're thinking about you, replaying moments, obsessing over what went right, what went wrong, when they should reach out. They just do it all in silence, alone in their head, because that's where they feel safest. For avoidants, closeness in real time can feel too intense. It brings up emotions they don't know how to regulate easily, like vulnerability, desire, or even joy. So instead of expressing what they're feeling in the moment, they retreat and reflect afterward. It's only when they're alone, no longer feeling overwhelmed by someone else's presence or expectations, that they begin to fully process what happened. And often, this processing becomes a mental loop. They think about what you said, how you made them feel, and whether or not they're ready to face those feelings again. This is where the obsession comes in. Avoidants frequently replay conversations, dwell on your reactions, and then analyze the dynamics of the relationship. But instead of using those thoughts as motivation to re-engage or communicate, they get stuck in their head. The silence isn't because they've forgotten you. It's because they're caught in an internal tug of war between wanting connection and fearing it. That mental loop becomes the comfort zone. They might even romanticize you from afar, creating idealized versions of the relationship in their mind, because in fantasy, the connection feels safe. There's no risk, no vulnerability, no fear of being hurt or needing to show up emotionally. In some cases, they'll check in from a distance, watching your stories, liking your posts, sending a meme, but they won't say what they're really thinking. This creates mixed signals for you. You sense their attention, you feel their presence, but there's no emotional transparency. It feels like you're being haunted by a ghost who never really left. That's because they haven't. Not mentally, not emotionally. They just haven't figured out how to make their inner world line up with outward actions. What's so important to understand here is that their silence is not equal to emotional absence. For avoidants, staying quiet is often a defense mechanism to protect themselves from the discomfort intimacy. They think if they just stay silent long enough, the feelings will pass, but often they don't. The feelings linger, and the obsession grows because it's unresolved. Meanwhile, you're left wondering why someone who clearly seemed to care has gone radio silent. The truth is, they're still emotionally entangled, but their way of dealing with those emotions is solitary. They isolate to process, they overthink instead of talk. And this gap between thought and action is what keeps avoidant dynamics so painful and unresolved. Their mental obsession doesn't always translate to real-world effort or emotional availability. This is one of the most frustrating and emotionally exhausting truths when dealing with an avoidant partner. You might sense the lingering energy between you, the way they still seem to care, the breadcrumbs they leave behind, the occasional moments of vulnerability they let slip. But then, when it comes to showing up in a consistent, meaningful way, they vanish. The emotional investment you feel from them doesn't match what they do. That's because in avoidant attachment, there's a significant gap between feeling and action. Just because someone is constantly thinking about you doesn't mean they're going to pick up the phone and call. Just because they lie awake at night, missing you doesn't mean they're emotionally ready to show up in a relationship. Avoidants can live inside their own head when it comes to relationships. They replay memories, think about what they could have done differently, fantasize about being with you again, but that's as far as it goes. They get stuck in the comfort of their thoughts because thoughts don't require vulnerability. Actions do. This internal obsession can be deeply real for them, but the moment they consider translating it into something tangible like opening up, apologizing, or making a plan, they hit a wall. Emotional availability means stepping into uncertainty. It means risking rejection or discomfort. It means being seen. For an avoidant, that level of openness is terrifying, no matter how much they want the connection. So they stay silent, or they offer surface-level engagement, flirty texts, random just thinking about you messages, or social media interactions that don't require real commitment. And that's what makes it so easy to get stuck in a cycle with them. You might keep hoping that because they're thinking about you, they'll come around. You might believe that the intensity of their thoughts will eventually push them to change. But emotional obsession and emotional maturity are not the same thing. They can care deeply and still be unavailable. They can want you and still be incapable of handling the relationship in a healthy way. And that realization can be painful, but also freeing. The disconnect between what they feel and what they're able to give isn't a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of where they are emotionally. Many people confuse emotional intensity with emotional readiness. Just because someone's feelings are strong doesn't mean they're ready to build something stable. Obsession, in this case, becomes a substitute for action. It fills the emotional space without requiring them to stretch outside of their comfort zone. It allows them to feel connected to you without doing the hard work of actually connecting. Understanding this can help you let go of false hope. It's not your job to wait around until they turn their thoughts into effort. You can honor the truth that they may care while also acknowledging that care without action isn't enough. Their thoughts live in their head. You deserve love that lives in the real world. You deserve clarity, consistency, and presence, not emotional breadcrumbs. When you're dealing with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, it's easy to get caught up in the small signals they throw your way. A late night message, a just checking in text weeks after they disappeared, a reaction to your story on social media. These moments feel significant because emotionally you're starving for connection, and even a crumb of attention can feel like a meal. But here's the truth you need to remember: the love you deserve doesn't show up in fragments. It shows up in full, with consistency, intentionality, and care. It's not your job to wait around until they turn their thoughts into effort. You can honor the truth that they may care while also acknowledging that care without action isn't enough. Their thoughts live in their head. You deserve love that lives in the real world. You deserve clarity, consistency, and presence, not emotional breadcrumbs. When you're dealing with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, it's easy to get caught up in the small signals they throw your way. A late night message, a just checking in text weeks after they disappeared, a reaction to your story on social media. These moments feel significant because emotionally you're starving for connection, and even a crumb of attention can feel like a meal. But here's the truth you need to remember: the love you deserve doesn't show up in fragments. It shows up in full, with consistency, intentionality, and care. You begin to settle for moments when what you actually want and deserve is a relationship that makes you feel safe, seen, and valued. Clarity means knowing where you stand with someone. It means not having to decode their silence or second-guess your importance in their life. Consistency means they don't just show up when it's convenient or when they miss you. It means they're there even when life is busy, even when emotions are uncomfortable. Presence means they are emotionally available, engaged, and willing to invest in a real connection, not just a fancy version of one. Breadcrumbs, on the other hand, keep you small. They feed you just enough to stop you from walking away, but never enough to truly satisfy your emotional needs. And the danger of breadcrumbs is that they make you question your standards. You start measuring love by how much attention you can get instead of how valued and supported you feel. That's not love, it's survival mode in a relationship. You are not asking for too much when you want emotional clarity and stability. Wanting someone who communicates honestly, shows up consistently, and is emotionally present is not a high bar, it's the bare minimum in a healthy relationship. When someone can't meet that, even if they care, even if they miss you, even if they're obsessed with you in their own mind, it's not enough. You can't build a relationship on thoughts and maybes. You build it on presence, on effort, and on mutual emotional investment. So don't romanticize inconsistency just because it comes from someone you care about. And don't mistake breadcrumbs for affection. Hold out for the kind of connection that doesn't just show up when it wants to, but shows up because it chooses you every day. That's the love you truly deserve. You deserve clarity, consistency, and presence, not emotional breadcrumbs. When someone gives you just enough to keep your hope alive, but never enough to feel secure or fulfilled, what they're offering isn't love, it's confusion. And when you're emotionally invested in someone who is avoidant, you can easily find yourself clinging to these crumbs, trying to make them feel like a whole meal. One nice message after days of silence. A vague compliment, a random I miss you with no follow through. These moments can feel powerful, even intoxicating, but they aren't the foundation of a healthy connection. They're emotional fragments that often leave you feeling more anxious than reassured. People with avoidant tendencies often struggle to offer consistent emotional presence. They can feel overwhelmed by intimacy and retreat when things start to feel too close. This leads to a push-pull dynamic, one where they disappear and reappear, show interest and then go cold. What makes it especially confusing is that these people often do care, but they express it in ways that lack clarity and reliability. So you end up spending more time trying to figure out what they mean, rather than feeling safe and seen in the relationship. This dynamic conditions you to overvalue minimal effort. You start interpreting consistent communication as emotional depth. You rationalize their silence as space, their coldness as independence, their inconsistency as mystery. But deep down, you're exhausted. You feel like you're constantly chasing emotional certainty in a relationship that never quite delivers it. And that's not what love is supposed to feel like. Real connection is built on reliability. It's knowing where you stand, not just hoping. It's not just someone thinking about you, it's someone showing up for you. A person who's emotionally present isn't afraid of the hard conversations, the messy feelings, or the growing closeness. They don't dip in and out of your life based on their level of comfort. They're because they want to be, because they choose to be consistently. Emotional breadcrumbs train you to shrink your needs. You begin to lower your expectations just to keep someone around. You tell yourself not to bring up what's bothering you because you're afraid it'll push them further away. But in doing so, you abandon yourself. You trade your peace for potential. And that's not the kind of connection that nourishes your soul. You're not asking for too much by wanting someone who's clear about their intentions, consistent in their actions, and emotionally present in your life. That's the minimum you should expect in a healthy relationship. When someone can't offer that, even if they're struggling with their own issues, it's okay to choose yourself. It's okay to walk away from mixed signals and emotional ambiguity, because the love that's meant for you won't confuse you. It won't leave you guessing. It will show up, stay present, and meet you in the middle. Not halfway and disappearing again. Don't take their silence personally. Take it as a cue to raise your standards, not lower your self-worth. When someone you care about suddenly withdraws, especially after a period of closeness or connection, the natural instinct is to turn inward. You begin asking yourself what you did wrong. You overanalyze your last conversation, your last text, your last look. You start to think, maybe I came on too strong. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe if I had just been a little more patient, a little less emotional, a little more perfect, they wouldn't have pulled away. But that's the trap. The silence of an avoidant partner is not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their emotional limitations. People with avoidant tendencies often step back when intimacy deepens, not because they don't like you, but because they feel unsafe in the closeness. That fear of vulnerability is theirs to own, not yours to fix. Still, it can be incredibly painful when someone you care about goes quiet, especially if you saw potential or felt connection. But pain is not the same as proof that you were wrong or inadequate. It's a sign of your emotional investment, not your failure. It's easy to take the silence personally because silence is ambiguous. It gives your mind room to fill in the blanks, and most people fill them with self-blame. But what if instead of seeing silence as a rejection, you saw it as a revelation? A moment of clarity that shows you what someone is emotionally capable of or not capable of. What if instead of asking, why am I not enough for them, you ask, why am I settling for someone who can't meet me emotionally? Your self-worth should not hinge on whether someone who struggles with closeness decides to communicate. It should be grounded in your ability to recognize your own needs and honor them. If you crave connection, consistency, and open communication, then someone's inability to give you those things isn't a reason to question yourself. It's a reason to raise your standards. When you raise your standards, you stop chasing love from people who can't give it freely. You stop trying to win over silence. You start choosing peace over potential. There's strength in deciding that being confused and emotionally starved is no longer acceptable. You're not cold or heartless for expecting someone to show up consistently. You're not demanding for wanting clarity. You're not too much for having emotional needs. You're human, and humans thrive on connection that feels safe and reciprocal, not chaotic and uncertain. So when someone pulls away, instead of bending to fit their discomfort, ask yourself what you need to feel secure and supported in love. Their silence might hurt, but it's also information, and you can use that information to make empowered decisions. You can decide that you no longer shrink yourself to be tolerable to someone else's fears. Because love should never require you to abandon your self-worth just to earn someone else's presence. Thank you so much for listening, for showing up for yourself today, and for choosing to seek clarity in the messiness of modern relationships. These conversations aren't always easy, but they're the ones that change everything. You deserve a love that doesn't confuse you, a connection that doesn't come and go, and a partner who doesn't just think about you, but chooses you openly and fully. Take care of your heart, set your standards high, and never forget your value isn't up for negotiation. Until next time, be kind to yourself, stay strong, and thank you for being here.